Hello everyone, this is part 16 of What If Naruto Traveled Back in Time and Changed, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. Projecting his voice, Naruto shouted, "The forest grows dark in the day. To the enemies of Konoha, stand down or the Tsuchikage's granddaughter dies." Onoki had stood up and was clutching the rails of the cage's box. That wasn't a genin down there, it was a monster. When his granddaughter was completely immobilized, he hesitated, knowing that it was too early to launch the invasion. Then the boy just challenged him, and he could feel the Hokage, Kazekage and Raikage beginning to rise. Orochimaru, from his position as Onoki's guard, saw things fall apart and knew that he needed to prematurely activate his invasion. He gave a hand signal to Kabuto and his hidden guards before he threw 4 super dense smoke bombs down on the ground of the booth. He darted forward and grabbed the third Hokage and jumped onto the roof of the stadium. He saw Jirobo, one of his biggest guards, with his curse mark activated as he threw the Kazekage up toward the roof as well. His Sound 4 fixed themselves into position and erected a barrier technique, 4 violet flames formation, around the designated battlefield. When all was said and done, Onoki was floating above Orochimaru, and they were backed up by 20 Sound Jonin. Across the rooftop from them was Itachi, Hiruzen, Raza and I. "Go, my loyal shinobi, buy me time to activate my jutsu," Orochimaru hissed, which prompted the 20 Sound Jonin to dart toward the cages. I cracked his neck and punched his fists together before he bellowed out in his loudest voice, "Kumo fights with Konoha." Then he dashed forward, encased in his lightning armor, to engage the incoming enemy. "Itachi, this is my fight. Back me up. Try to find a way out of the barrier to lead our forces," Hiruzen said, throwing off his cage cloak and emerging as his old-school battle uniform. Raza had dark rings form around his eyes as gold dust began pouring out of a seal on his arm. "I will assist the Raikage." As the smoke bombs went off in the Hokage's box, feathers fell over the arena and captured the civilians and genin in a wide-scale just that induced sleep. Naruto saw this, condensed his chakra and then emitted it in a single, powerful pulse to dispel the genjutsu. That was one of Orochi team's plans foiled. However, that momentary distraction provided the opportunity for nearly 20 Iwa Jonin to surround Naruto. He sensed some incoming reinforcements, but he would need to deal with the enemies that were currently surrounding him. The fight was fast and violent as Naruto dodged and weaved through earth jutsus, kunai, shuriken and many other attacks. One thing was for certain, the Iwa Jonin were not expecting the level of speed, reaction time and power that Naruto was currently bringing to the table. He had shown no mercy as he dodged around and countered attacks with his own arsenal. After collecting enough chakra and determining enemy positions, Naruto rolled out of the way of an earth bullet, and placed his hands on the ground while calling out, "Mokuton, pit of wooden spikes." The ground fell out from under a group of 5 Iwa Jonin, and they screamed as they fell and were met by sharp wooden spikes that impaled them all over their bodies. Han had dispatched 2 Konoha Jonin when the chaos began, and he was making his way to the arena. After a brief tussle with Might Guy, he sent the eccentric green beast flying with a steam-powered kick. He saw his fellow Iwa shinobi and Sound allies fighting around the arena, but they were outmatched. They needed to turn the tides of battle. He flashed into a 3-tailed cloak, the maximum that he could force out of Kokuo, and dashed to the arena floor. Temari had gathered Samui, Karui, Omoi and Yugito and they were attempting to reinforce Naruto on the stadium floor. The fighting was fierce throughout the stadium, but it was clear to her that the Iwa Jonin were the only threats. The Sound shinobi were poorly trained one-trick ponies, and they couldn't stand up to her or Team Yugito. Temari saw a red cloak with 3 tails emerge around Han and she saw him moving toward Naruto. Her body moved on its own as she performed a wind shunshin and appeared immediately behind Naruto. Han was nearly to the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki and he collected steam into his arm and flung it forward with the intent to snuff the life out of his primary objective and save Kuretsuki. He saw the boy was on the ground with his back turned as he cast yet another jutsu that took out 3 of the remaining Iwa Jonin. Suddenly, Han saw the Suna Kunoiki appear in between him and his target, but his fist was already in motion, propelled by the potent steam power of Kokuo. The sound of shearing metal followed by a fleshy squelching sound echoed through the chaos of the arena. Naruto was fighting off the Iwa Jonin and it was getting easier to avoid their attacks as their numbers dwindled. He saw two of them attempting to remove Kuretsuki from her tree binding and formed a snake seal, which made the tree surrounding Kuretsuki sprout two wooden spikes that tore through the Iwa Jonin's flak jackets like a bullet through target paper. He dodged out of the way of a kick from another Jonin, and he lashed out with Raihoko, the blade he received from Tempest, and severed the forearm of said Jonin. He then channeled wind chakra into the blade before swiping horizontally and throwing a wind blade at stomach height that bisected three Iwa Jonin that were moving toward him. Naruto felt the surge of Kokuo's chakra and knew the real battle would begin soon, but he still had too many enemies right in front of him to deal with. After lashing out with his wind blade and killing those three Jonin, he felt Han's chakra closing fast and then he heard the sound of shearing metal and flesh being torn. His senses told him what happened before he turned around, but his mind refused to believe it. He couldn't believe it. He wouldn't believe it. Naruto's head turned and saw Han standing with his arm extended and he could see his hand covered in red chakra emerging out of the back of a kunoichi with four sandy blonde buns. In that moment, Naruto's world turned red. In that moment, death would be unleashed upon the world. In that moment, Han realized that he just ate up. The whole battlefield stilled as a terrible, visible, potent ping of red chakra spread around Konoha. Everyone froze as the chakra ring expanded at the speed of sound and heads turned towards the point of origin. A second after the pulse was released, a dome of blood red, potent chakra formed around Naruto and a pillar of red chakra shot into the sky. Civilians and dignitaries around the stadium froze mid-step in their evacuation efforts when they felt the sinister ping of out-of-control Biju chakra. Fear, overwhelming fear, with a dash of hopelessness overwhelmed their senses and demanded all of their attention. Their heads turned mechanically, eyes widened in fear, urine flowed down legs, heart spasmed uncontrollably and ration fled. What was once a controlled evacuation effort became a mad dash away from the source of their fear. In the evacuation bunkers, civilians and younger ninja teams experienced similar reactions to the civilians in the arena. Despite being protected by hundreds of feet of earth within the Hokage monument, terror saturated every cell of their being. People fainted, crumpled to the ground in sniveling messes, shook with fear and latched onto loved ones. After the first minute of shock wore off, terrified screams filled the bunker. Nobody could calm the fear in their hearts and thus pandemonium reigned supreme. The overall result, inside the barriers, scared whispers started, and rumors fueled by speculation began to spread. Ino was working with Team 10, Hinata and Shino to evacuate the civilians toward the nearest safe zone. Asuma was in charge and was handling most of the fighting, but she was already bloody from fights that she was forced to take. She had just protected a mother and child from some sound thug when she felt the pulse of chakra. Her head immediately turned toward the arena and her heart was overwhelmed with fear for Naruto. Something had gone wrong, something had gone terribly, terribly wrong. Asuma snapped her out of it and returned her focus to the mission, but it was difficult to ignore the sinister feeling that fell over the stadium. Hikari, Rias and Yosuke froze from within the daimyo's barrier and their heads turned toward Naruto. As the pulse spread through the arena and penetrated the barrier, they were each forcibly drawn back into the mindscape. The wood clones they were occupying disintegrated as they lost the will to hold their form, which earned curious looks from those in the booth. As they entered into a chaotic mindscape, they saw Kurama attempting to fight and restrain his chakra, but it was futile. Kurama was watching from the cottage inside the seal as his partner dismantled the enemy forces. The sun burned intensely and the whole mindscape vibrated with energy and senjutsu chakra as his host drew upon the might of his potent chakra to combat his enemies. Suddenly, he saw Temari's form through the mental link and everything went crazy inside the seal. Kurama was forced into his fox form. The mindscape went black with a blood-red moon that somehow pierced through the fierce chakra storm that emerged out of nowhere. Kurama was fighting the pull of his chakra, which was creating the chakra storm. Suddenly, he saw Naruto's unconscious form and he took up a defensive position around his partner and continued to attempt to close the chakra link. Tsunade was down in the medical bay where the injured finalists were being treated when she felt the chakra pulse followed by the potent flare of Kurama's chakra. It was clear to her that something bad happened and Naruto had lost control. When he was in control, Kurama's chakra felt warm, protective and overwhelmingly powerful. This chakra felt enraged, sinister and bloodthirsty. Soon it focused chakra to her fist and unleashed a potent wave of it on 4 frozen sound shinobi. They were splattered against the wall before the tunnels of the stadium were blown away from the force of Tsunde's punch. She dashed through her newly created tunnel and out into the arena. Shinobi around Konoha froze as a familiar, sinister aura nearly caused them to shit their pants. Their hearts beat rapidly and they nearly short-circuited when memories of 13 years ago flashed through their minds. The vile chakra of the Kyuubi had returned to Konoha and they were beyond terrified. In the middle of counter-invasion operations, Shinobi either froze or pulled upon their will to overcome their fear. That day, many Konoha shinobi would permanently brand themselves as heroes that overcame their fears or cowards that gave in to the trauma of their pasts. 5 seconds after the chakra surrounded Naruto, Han had remained frozen stiff if fear with his hand still holding Temari's lifeless body. He removed his hand from her chest and let her fall unceremoniously to the arena floor, which was a big mistake. As if the ominous chakra could feel what happened, a blood-red, wooden tail covered in potent red chakra shot out of the chakra ball and slammed into Han. Han was sent flying into the arena wall, only alive due to his own chakra shroud and the instant reaction that allowed him to block the sudden attack. As the dark chakra ball faded, Naruto could be seen in his stage 2 transformation. All of his skin was melted off, his body was composed of blood red and black chakra, 8 tails waved about frantically behind him, fox ears made of chakra bone were fixed upon his head, his nails were overgrown like fearsome kitsune claws, his face was distorted as a cracked mouth appeared and let out an ear-piercing roar. As the stage 2 transformation started to settle over Naruto, there were bones forming over his black and red body and a fox head snapped into place over Naruto's own. The pupils of this chakra form were a solid black sclera with a single red slit in the center of the black orbs. Yami Naruto had returned to wreak vengeance upon the world. As is operating on instinct, the cubified Naruto disappeared and reappeared above Han as he attempted to free himself from the arena wall. Yami appeared above Han and slammed 2 linked fists down on the Iwa Jinchuriki's head. A massive dust cloud filled the arena as a 50-meter crater was formed. Yami continued pummeling the stunned Han with a fearsome barrage of fists and tails. Each strike sent a shockwave of chakra and power echoing through the crater. Digging deeper and deeper into the arena floor, Yami continued his assault of the defenseless form of Han. Han was able to shake off some of the disorientation after he dodged out of another crippling blow that sent earth, dust and bits of the stadium flying. He righted himself and was able to condense some steam within his body to prepare for a counterattack. Within the veil of the dust cloud, Han waited for his opportunity as the enraged Kyuubi Jinchuriki locked onto his new position and lunged at him. Han felt his power swell from the steam gourd on his back as he channeled the powerful medium through his back and arm. His fist connected with Yami's face and cracked some of the bone skull that was forming around the rampaging Jinchuriki. Yami was sent careening into the stadium wall despite using his tails to slow his flight. With a shake of his head and a roar, Yami darted back toward Han once more. This time, the Mokuton tails blocked Han's attack before Yami condensed potent yokai around his right hand and launched a counterattack into Han's abdomen. Han folded over Yami's fist like laundry in a monastery before coughing up a sizable quenny of blood that spattered Yami's feet. Before Han could react, another double hammer fist slammed into the back of his head to propel his face into the dirt and create another crater. Han couldn't think clearly, each blow carried staggering force and Kokuo's chakra could no longer protect him against the might of the Kyuubi. Han continued to try and pull Kokuo's chakra, but even if he had all 5 tails, it would still be vastly inferior to the 8 tails of Kyuubi's chakra that were laying into him. He had tried to keep a defensive form, his mind unable to react or do anything other than defend. The steam and Biju chakra he was emitting in an attempt to defend himself was scattered by each deadly blow. After another minute of pummeling Kokuo's container, Yami threw his head back and let out a bestial roar that echoed around Konoha. Yami picked Han up by his throat, the Iwa veteran no longer shrouded in his chakra cloak. Yami was choking the life out of the man that had robbed him of his soulmate. Completely overwhelmed by grief, anger and hatred, Yami let loose another roar into Han's face. The concussive force inflicting more damage on the nearly dead Jinchuriki. Yami couldn't contain his rage, he couldn't stop the overwhelming sorrow that poured out from the hole in his shattered soul. He threw Han up in a fit of rage and Eight Tails chased the airborne form of the Iwa Jinchuriki. Eight Tails ripped into Han's now lifeless form and held him suspended in the air over the arena. Blood-red Mokuton tails ripped into each arm, 2 tails impaled the torso, 1 in the groin and 1 in the neck. With a roar, Yami shredded Iwa's Jinchuriki into pieces and closed his eyes as Han's blood rained down on his face. Caught in a moment of brief reprieve, Yami basked in the bloody essence of his slain foe. With another bestial roar, Yami darted toward the barrier where he felt some familiar chakra. Earlier in the barrier, Orochimaru had finished his jutsu as 2 of his sound Jonin remained standing. Onoki had held off Raza and Hiruzen with liberal application of his dust release. 5 coffins emerged from the ground and Hiruzen formed an earth and fire combination jutsu to stop the 4th coffin from emerging. The earth and fire dragon slammed into the 4th coffin before it could open, but that was the only one that could be stopped. Hashirama Senju, Tobirama Senju, Mito Uzumaki and Kushina Uzumaki stepped out for the 4 remaining coffins. Their forms appeared cracked, the skin pale, the bodies were mere husks in the visage of their former selves. What are we doing here? Where are we? Hashirama asked while looking around manically. Tobirama sighed while Mito looked adoringly at her husband. Easy dear, it appears that your brother did not heed your warning. I sense we are back in Konoha, if all of these chakra signatures are what I think they are. Tobirama growled, I created the jutsu to talk to fallen comrades lost in important missions. How should I know it would be used in such a manner? Hiruzen watched his previous mentors in a state of stunned disbelief. It was too much for him to take in. S-sensei. His cracked voice escaped him and garnered the attention of the newly resurrected. Hashirama turned and beamed a smile at Hiruzen. Oh, Hiruzen, how are you so old? Tobirama face-palmed, brother, clearly much time has passed since our deaths. This didn't deter Hashirama, and my village is still standing. And look at that, Toby. And Uchiha is the Hokage. Hashirama said proudly, giving a thumbs up to Itachi. Raza and Itachi watched the bizarre conversation among legends. It was then that I noticed the silent figure. Kushina, is that you? Kushina looked toward I and smiled. Unlike the others, her skin seemed healthy and there were no cracks in her form. Hello again, I. Thank you for helping to defend Konoha. You are not here to defend Konoha. Orochimaru dashed forward and placed 3 kunai into the back of Hashirama's, Tobirama's and Mito's heads. He attempted to put one in Kushina, but he was forced to dodge backwards as chains escaped her body and attempted to pierce him. How are you resisting my jutsu? Kushina jumped over to the side of the other cage, turned around and smirked devilishly at Orochimaru. Easy, my soul is never, and will never be, under your control. She thanked Kami for this opportunity mentally. Orochimaru growled and ordered the resurrected souls to attack his enemies. They were about to engage in combat when an ominous pulse of chakra halted the imminent battle and gathered everyone's attention. That's the Kyuubi's chakra, Mito said while looking toward the source of the chakra pulse. And it is powerful and out of control. Tobirama added. Onoki floated up and paled when he saw the cubified Yami beating down Han. Orochimaru, we need to hurry up. The boy has 8 tails, and he is in his stage 2 form. He is ripping Han apart. Kushina looked concerned over towards her Sochi before her attention snapped back to her resurrected enemies. I will take Mito. I am the only one that can counter her combat Fuinjutsu. I smashed his fist into an open hand. I always wanted to fight Tobirama. Raza looked at Itachi, think you could hold off Lord first. I have an old goat to gut. Itachi nodded. Hiruzen summoned Enma and had him take his staff form. Very well, Orochimaru, it is high time I corrected my past mistakes. A pitched, multifaceted battle ensued. Jutsus were flung around freely, and carnage reigned supreme on the stadium roof for the next 5 minutes. The barrier was the only thing protecting Konoha from multiple S-rank jutsus that were powered by some of the most powerful shinobi of all time. The barrier was only 100 meter by 50 meters, which didn't leave quite enough room for 5 S-ranked battles to take place without clashing into one another. Hashirama's prodigious use of the Mokuton created a forest that was destroyed a minute later as Raza dodged Onoki's dust release. I sent Tobirama flying through trees only for him to reform and use a high-powered water jutsu to slice through trees as I dodged the attack. Kushina and Mito pitched Uzumaki-style Fuinjutsu battle, creating explosions from Kushina and molecular disintegration from Mito. It was complete and total pandemonium within the barrier. In comparison to these fights, the fight between Orochimaru and Hiruzen was fairly stale. Bow versus sword clashed, with Enma complaining every now and then about taking damage from the legendary Kusanagi sword wielded by Orochimaru. Every now and then, the two would exchange jutsu that proved completely ineffective, despite looking fairly flashy. Hiruzen jumped back onto a tree grown by Hashirama to take a moment and catch his breath. That was when he noticed something red and menacing coming through the barrier. Yami had reveled in the blood of the five-tailed Jinchuriki for a couple seconds before he darted off in search of his next target, a target he decided was responsible for the death of his soulmate. He could feel the influence of the alternate personalities and Kurama trying to regain control, but he wouldn't give it back until his vengeance had been taken. With single-minded determination, Yami launched himself at the barrier. 8 tails made primarily of Mokuton chakra that was sucked up by Kurama's chakra ripped into the barrier. The purplish barrier wavered as the tails penetrated it, and then Yami gave a mighty roar and pulled the barrier apart. An Anbu squad had posted themselves next to the purple barrier after watching one of their comrades burn alive after simply touching the barrier. As they were trying to discover a way through, they felt the chakra ping before the overwhelming pressure of the Kyuubi's chakra froze them in place. They were unable to avert their eyes from the brutal pounding that the Senju boy imposed on Iwa's Jinchuriki. Their eyes widened and jaws dropped when they watched the Iwa veteran get dismembered in a brutal fashion. Holy shit, Captain. How are we going to stop that thing? A boar-masked Anbu asked his leader in a stunned and terrified voice. Hawk was broken out of his shock by his subordinate's question. I don't know. We need to find a way through this barrier first and foremost. This is the 4 violet flames formation barrier. We cannot break through, and if we attempt to meddle with it, well, you saw what happened to Bear, Cat said. Well, we can't. Holy shit. Hawk shouted as Yami's tails impaled through the barrier. Hawk watched as the tails forced their way through with a wiggle. It looked like some terrifying snake writhing out of its hole before Hawk heard Yami roar. As Konoha's Jinchuriki roared, Hawk watched the barrier begin to pixelate, then crack and finally shatter. With a mighty crack, the arena side of the barrier shattered into millions of shards and pixels of residual chakra that led to a chain reaction of the barrier disintegrating. The backlash of the barrier being forcibly destroyed rendered the Sound 4 momentarily unconscious due to the sudden drain and backlash of their chakra. Through the disintegrating barrier, a red blur moved with startling speed towards where Yami could sense an old and dusty-feeling chakra. Onoki was floating above the earth, dodging clouds and clumps of gold dust that were threatening him. It had been years since he engaged in such a battle, and even 10 minutes of operating at nearly full capacity was taking its toll on the ancient Tsuchikage. He darted through the air to avoid multiple golden spears when he processed the barrier shattering. He knew their time was up and he needed to break contact and join the invading forces. As he had this thought, a red chakra-covered fist sent him careening into one of the few Mokuton trees that were standing. Yami enjoyed every millisecond that his fist connected with the Tsuchikage. The power of Kyuubi's chakra urged him forward and fueled his rage. He would never stop until he had his revenge. Yami landed from his voyage through the air, skid for a couple meters and immediately dashed toward where Onoki was recovering from the surprise blow. Yami was forced to dodge a ray of dust release chakra that disintegrated a tree behind his position. As Yami closed the distance, he saw a square cube of dust release chakra hovering in between Onoki's 2 old hands. He was too close and moving too fast to dodge, so as Onoki released the attack, Yami folded his tails in front of him and absorbed the impact of the potent jutsu. It hurt, it burned the chakra-covered skin of Yami as Kurama's chakra fought against the disintegrating effects of the dust release jutsu. Eventually, the Jinchuriki won out and sent a tail extending toward a panting Onoki. Onoki couldn't believe it. This damn demon boy ruined everything. He had already captured his granddaughter, foiled the invasion by forcing its preemptive activation, killed one of his Jinchuriki, and now he had become the first beast to ever survive his dust release. Then a burning tail slammed into his gut and knocked him on his back for the second time in the fight. Onoki rolled and dodged a tail that attempted to impale him, but the second, third, fourth and fifth tails connected. Yami took great pleasure as his chakra tails impaled the ugly midget of a man. His screams were pure joy to Yami's ears, his writhing sent shivers of pleasure through Yami's tails and right up his spine. The corrosive chakra eating the Tsuchikage alive by killing every living thing it touched combined with the chakra-absorbing effects of the Mokuton tails took a heavy toll on the Tsuchikage. Orochimaru saw the barrier shattering and he saw his sensei struggling to catch his breath. He wanted more time to drag out his torture, he wanted to savor the death of his perceived betrayer. Once again, the Senju brat interferes with his plans and denies him the ability to savor the moment. He molded a great queni of chakra before he hunched over and spewed out an uncountable number of snakes by using his formation of 10,000 snakes jutsu, so I guess the count would be roughly 10,000. As Hiruzen prepared a jutsu to counter this, Orochimaru used his hiding in the surface jutsu to phase into the ground. Hiruzen counted the innumerable snakes with a wide-scale, regal fire dragon jutsu. The regal variant was approximately 3 times larger and stronger than the normal fire dragon and it consumed a considerable amount of chakra. Hiruzen spouted the regal dragon and flames descended on the writhing mass of snakes that seemed to have swords sticking out of their mouths. As the last of the oxygen left his lungs, the jutsu died down showing that only ashes remained of the impromptu summons. Hiruzen scanned the battlefield, and he couldn't locate his student. He knew Orochimaru was slippery and there was no way he would have been caught in such an obvious jutsu. He saw Hashirama get released from the impure world resurrection as Itachi's reddish-orange Susanoo stabbed him with the sword of Tatsuka, sealing the Hokage's soul into the Susanoo's gourd until such a time that Itachi released it. That momentary distraction cost him dearly as Orochimaru emerged out of the tree behind him and stabbed him with the Kusanagi. He noticed too late that his student had taken his back and he was unable to completely dodge the Kusanagi that stabbed through his right shoulder. He managed to prevent a scream from escaping his throat and his good arm grabbed his student's left arm. Sarutobi breathed out a small, dense cloud of ash and clicked his teeth to ignite the explosion, which blew him apart from his student. Kushina was battling with Mito in a high-stakes battle and was having a tough time dealing with her predecessor despite Mito holding back quite a bit. The battle continued after the barrier shattered until Kushina was finally able to trap Mito in her sealing chains. Kushina gave her a brief but heartwarming goodbye before her adamantine chains dug into her head and removed the kunai tag that was anchoring her soul to the sacrificed body. The body crumbled to dust and Mito's soul waved goodbye as it returned to the pure world. As Kushina caught her breath and took stock of things, she saw her Sochi in his 8-tailed state standing over a downed opponent. Without thinking and with her chains still flailing, she darted towards her son. As she got closer, she saw that he had tails that looked eerily like her chakra chains, and they were impaled in the Tsuchikage. Well, shit, here's to the start of the Fourth Great War. Kushina extended her chains and began to wrap her Sochi in each of his tails, struggling against the concentrated might of Kurama's chakra. Yami felt the chains wrapping around him and he would not be denied his vengeance. As he was immobilized, he focused on pulling his tails apart and he was rewarded by the sickening sound of bones cracking and flesh being ripped apart. With his final act of vengeance fulfilled, Yami accepted the forced immobilization from his mother's chains. Yami closed his eyes. With the suppression from his mother he could no longer deny the influence of Naruto and the altars. In Naruto's mindscape after Han was killed, Rias was finally able to stir Naruto awake. He was confused and looked around before the image of Temari with a fist through her chest flashed into his mind. He crumpled into a ball on the ground, completely oblivious to the chakra storm that was encompassing the mindscape. Completely oblivious and uncaring of the chaos caused by a personality he thought he had long since integrated. Hikari's hugs, Rias pleas, Yosuke's stoic support and a struggling Kurama attempted to snap Naruto out of it. They needed him to get his shit together and regain control of his body before somebody he loves got hurt. Naruto remained oblivious until the image of his mother forced its way through the mental link. The feel of her chakra and the warmth of her love wrapped around him and gave him strength as her chains forcibly calmed the angry chakra. In the last moments of Yami's control, Naruto saw the Tsuchikage get ripped apart and he felt Yami stop fighting against his own will. With a disorienting rush, he closed his eyes, and he was looking into the violet orbs of his mother when he returned to the real world. Naruto's skin was smoking as Kurama worked overtime with his remaining chakra to undo the damage caused by such a potent Phase 2 transformation. That was the most of Kurama's chakra that Naruto's young body had handled at one time. Luckily, it was only active 10 to 12 minutes, he couldn't really tell since he was unconscious for a while. As he peered into his mother's eyes, her chains receded, and she sped to his side to prevent him from falling over in exhaustion. Mom, how are you here? Naruto asked through gasps of breath. Kushina smiled radiantly and answered softly, well, the snake team tried forcing me to serve him with the impure world resurrection. Kami simply wouldn't allow it, but she said that I could help you defend Konoha since Orochimaru was breaking the rules of the natural order anyway. Naruto looked around, still trying to recover despite the fiery pain coursing through his body, on his skin and in his heart. He closed his eyes and tried to force himself to calm down enough to absorb nature energy to assist in the healing. It's good to see you again, Mom. Thanks for helping me. Take care of Temari when she gets to Kami's realm. Tears started falling from his eyes. Itachi had been listening to the interaction since Orochimaru had used a reverse summoning jutsu to flee and the other reincarnations were sealed away or dealt with. Raza was standing next to him and fell to his knees in sorrow. Itachi spoke, is that what made you lose control? Naruto nodded, the pain and shock went so deep. It seems Yami made his comeback and took control. He is being tied up in my mindscape and the others are keeping a close eye on him. It seems like he no longer wishes to fight now that he has taken his revenge. Kushina smiled with a soft sadness before she raised Naruto's chin and forced him to meet her gaze. It is not your fault, Sochi. Now, this isn't over yet. Kami is calling me back now that the snake bastard is no longer here. I love you. I am proud of you. I believe in you. Kushina had pulled Naruto into a hug and placed a loving K on his still smoking forehead. Itachi let the two have their moment and an Anbu stopped by to tell him that Hiruzen had been evacuated to the hospital for treatment. I walked up to the group and whistled when he saw the shredded remains of Onoki. Damn, brat, how are we going to explain this one? Raza stood with a look of rage in his eyes. Naruto, you said that there are 5,000 shinobi incoming. Naruto watched his mother's soul leave the body and it crumbled to ash and leaves as her soul returned to Kami's realm. He shifted positions away from Onoki's remains and the Oto corpse before he sat in his meditative position. Give me a sec, Papa Raza. Naruto gathered the turbulent nature energy that was in the stadium and surrounding forests. He felt strength return to his body as the potent natural life force flooded his tenketsu and worked alongside Kurama to repair the damage. He tuned out those sensations and focused on forcing his senses externally before he spread his area of influence. After 2 minutes, his sage markings returned, and he gathered the overflowing information from his senses. Death, grief, panic, terror, despair, rage and many more emotions flooded his senses and made it difficult to glean the information he was looking for. He also felt a strange, yet somehow familiar, energy hovering in the stadium in great quantities. Filtering out all of the unnecessary information, Naruto was finally able to feel the battle raging at the village walls. It was fierce and he felt Gaara was in his fully transformed state fighting off what felt like snake summons. His eyes snapped open, they are here, north and west gates are under heavy assault. I didn't waste time counting but we need to go. Gaara is already synced with Shukaku, and he can only hold that transformation for 20 minutes. Without another word, the group of the most powerful shinobi in the nations darted off toward the raging battle. Naruto ignored the burning in his coils and the overwhelming feeling of exhaustion. When this was over, he was going to be in bed for a long time. 15 minutes prior, the sound shinobi made their move. It started with 5 massive snake summons, and one summon was a giant 3-headed snake for Kami's sake. Thanks to the early warning and early start of the invasion, a perimeter defense force was able to be summoned. The bad news was that the snakes were resilient and very difficult to dispel. It was as the snakes were summoned that the pulse of Kyuubi's chakra hit the perimeter guard and they all saw the pillar of demonic chakra shoot into the sky. They felt the overwhelming presence and rage contained in the chakra, but Chooser Akamaki was able to rally the defenders to focus on their assigned tasks. Despite having a platoon of Akamaki, the snakes were able to create 4 sizable holes in the wall. The desperation of the defenders forced Gaara's hand, and 2 minutes after the walls were breached, he was able to synchronize with Shukaku. The tanuki was more than happy to get some time out of the seal and let loose a little chaos. The defenders fell back and Gaara became the front line of defense in between the wood line and the breached walls of Konoha. It was the Akamaiki that bought the time for Gaara's transformation, but the snakes lashed out with the giant tails and that was how the walls were breached. The Uchiha police force answered the early call for reinforcements, and they joined the hectic battle. The Hyuga bowmen ignored the giant summons since their arrows were ineffective and they focused on holding the groups of sound shinobi at bay. After 10 minutes of fighting, more reinforcements were able to reach the wall as the initial wave of attackers was mostly dealt with. Unfortunately, after 10 minutes of pandemonium, 3 of the 5 summons remained and the casualties on both sides continued to grow. Gaara and Shukaku were engaged in a clash of ans against the 3-headed snake summon while Konoha defenders did their best to keep the walls plugged. Unfortunately, when Iwa's reinforcements arrived, multiple enemy squads were able to get past the defensive lines and enter the village. Jiraiya had been cleaning house around the stadium after the barrier was erected. He was infuriated to see that his old teammate had launched such a bold offensive against his village of origin. He was further incensed by the fact that Iwa joined the invasion, and he wasn't even aware of it. He panicked when Naruto went into the out-of-control QB mode, but there was literally nothing he could do about that except pray he didn't target Konoha shinobi. Last he saw, he was completely focused on Han, and he couldn't afford to stand around and watch him. He cursed as massive explosions shook the village near the Uchiha police station and district. He knew those explosions. He had fought against them many times in the Second and Third Wars. It was the Iwa Demolition Corps that had the most potent wielders of the explosion release bloodline and other massively destructive jutsus. He changed course to go deal with that threat since there didn't appear to be any action at the walls yet. He was able to follow the explosions and neutralize 3 shinobi bearing the insignia of the Iwa Explosion Corps. After eliminating the 3 shinobi, he saw the snake summons and knew he was needed at the walls. Unfortunately, it was then that he was ambushed by the 2 remaining members of the Explosion Corps. He was able to survive the ambush by covering himself in his hair and hardening it. He then used the hardened hair like a porcupine shaking out its quills to wound one of the shinobi. It took him 8 minutes to finish off the 2 elite Jonin level shinobi and he didn't escape that fight scot-clean. After catching his breath, he darted towards the battle at the village walls. Jiraiya appeared in his favorite way, a very flashy manner. After summoning Gamaken and Geratora, 2 of the elite snake summons were crushed by the Food Cart Destroyer no Jutsu, as Jiraiya dubbed it. Jiraiya left the 3-headed snake to Gaara and focused on stemming the flow of Iwa shinobi that were entering the village. Shortly after arriving, he felt the arrival of the big guns and grinned in satisfaction. A horn blew that informed Konoha shinobi to fall back and reform lines and Jiraiya heeded that call with everyone except Gaara. As the horn blew, the rookies were joining the counter-attack effort after they had dropped of the last of the civilian evacuees. They were all mortified by the terrified faces of the adult civilians and the hushed murmurs they picked up. They each knew that the terrifying feeling earlier was Naruto, and it really did feel like he had lost control. They were each scared in their own way, but they were resolved to protect their home and fight side by side next to their comrades. They were able to arrive on the wall to bear witness to an act that would go down in history amidst the greatest heroes and protectors of Konoha's vaunted history. Naruto had asked Shikaku to sound the horn and he began molding his chakra. It was time for the world to fear the Mokuton once again. Naruto jumped from the village walls over the last of the retreating defenders and landed in a crouch in front of a couple thousand Iwa and sound shinobi. Before they could react, Naruto called out, "Wood style, violent deep forest emergence." Unlike the serene rebuilding of the Great Jura Forest, this was a violent demonstration of the power of nature. Massive trees sprouted rapidly in the direction of the attacking forces. Each tree creating sharp thorns and wooden spikes as they sought out chakra signatures in their path. It became a violent symphony of Mother Nature's rage as a newly grown forest laid waste to the invading forces. The violent symphony escalated to its natural crescendo as the terrified screams mingled with the roar of a newly emerged forest. The symphony's name was Death, and its debut upon the elemental nations was absolute. The encroaching Iwa and Oto forces let out terrified screams as wooden branches, Thorns, vines, or trees tore through their ranks. Iwa hadn't seen true war for nearly 20 years, which meant that most of their attacking force had never bore witness to the chaos of battle before. Thus, the inexperienced invaders perished as panic disabled their rational thinking. The wooden forest claimed many frozen victims whose blood became the first offering to the woodland monstrosity. Kitsuki was working alongside Han to organize the charge and maintain the momentum of the invasion. He was waiting to involve himself until the big guns showed up, and he had ordered Roshi to do the same. Then, he saw one of their primary targets of the invasion land on the ground in front of Konoha's walls after the retreat was organized. His experience to him to run, hide, defend, or do anything to escape the wrath of this man's chakra. He could feel the massive queni of chakra molding, and instinct guided him into gathering his own chakra. To his side, Roshi was doing the same as twin domes of earth and lava were erected over Iwa forces within range of the two's jutsu. Kitsuki rode out the brief earthquake that the emerging forest caused and let out a breath of relief as the wood didn't manage to penetrate through the multiple earthen domes his forces had erected. Then he felt a serene feeling was over the domes, and the sounds of battle outside came to a brief halt. Through cracks in the multiple earthen domes, he saw what looked to be yellow pollen floating all around. More domes, now. And don't breath in the air. Kitsuki roared loud enough to be heard by all those in his vicinity. His forces moved to comply with his orders as they fought off the serene feeling that was calling them to sleep. After holding the deep forest emergence jutsu for 20 seconds and creating acres of forest, Naruto flipped to the snake and bird seals before calling out, wood-style, flowery deep forest bloom, which caused giant red flowers with multiple golden stamens to emerge from trees all over the forest. Switching to the rat-hand seal, Naruto finished the final jutsu of the series with wood-style pollination of the divine forest. Big globules of golden pollen suffused the air and began putting the attacking shinobi forces to sleep. On the wall, the rookies watched alongside their Konoha brethren as the rebirth of Hashirama Senju laid waste to the invading forces in a single decisive blow. The jaws were on the floor and their brains were barely comprehending what their eyes were showing them. If not for their many comrades repeatedly saying things like, unfreaking believable, or, Lord first, or, the power of Mokuton, or, Lord Senju saved us, then the rookies would have remained in a stunned state of denial. However, the reverent whispers were able to confirm that this was indeed happening. Their comrade, friend and fellow shinobi was indeed halting an invasion single-handedly. Shika, how is this possible? Chuji asked as he stood completely still next to his friend. I don't know, Chuji. Shika responded. I knew Naruto was strong. I knew he could use the Mokuton, but I never even imagined he was this strong, Ino said in a reverent whisper as silent praise for her lover. It is because he loves you all. That is what gives him this strength, Kankuro said. He had been supporting Gaara, but he rejoined the rookies when the horn was sounded. I grew up with the guy and he is a brother to me. He did this for y'all. Not for your village, not for your Hokage, but for each of you. Neji, who had been pulled by Hiashi to join the Hyuga Corps early on, joined the conversation as he broke out of his shock thanks to a trickle of blood falling into his eye. It is unbelievable. I always wondered how Naruto stood up to my father on that night when he was only a boy, but now it is clear. He must have let my father go for some reason, because my father could never stand up to someone capable of doing this. Rock Lee walked onto the rampart with a limp, and he was supporting Ten-Ten, who was injured and bleeding from a wound to her side. She was also in a state of shock from watching the display, but her shock deepened as she watched a volley of fireballs get shot into the woods. Naruto's Sage Mode faded after the final jutsu, and he collapsed to the ground in a heap. Itachi ordered Inoki Yamanaka to take him from the battlefield and get him to the hospital. After watching the monstrous display of power from his student, the fifth Hokage ordered fire users to launch a volley of fire jutsus into the newly emerged and pollinated forest. The remaining Uchiha launched several fire dragons that led the volley of fireballs into the forest. The flammable pollen ignited upon contact with the flames, which caused a massive explosion in the newly emerged forest. After the heat from the explosion died down to tolerable levels, Itachi, and Raza led the counter-offensive into the fiery forest. What ensued was a slaughter of the survivors until they ran into nearly 1,000 Iwa shinobi that had managed to regroup under the leadership of Kitsuki, son of the third Tsuchikage and father of Kuretsuki. This led to a pitched battle that lasted until less than 500 Iwa shinobi scattered into an unorganized retreat. Rather than hunt him down, Itachi ordered his forces back to Konoha to secure the village and begin recovery. Underground base in Rice Country. In a dark room that was dimly lit by torches, two golden orbs glistened with fury in the dark. The Senju brat had foiled Orochimaru's plans of destruction and revenge. He couldn't even take solace in that fact that his sensei was dead because the old monkey was still clinging to life in the hospital. Orochimaru hissed at the thought, completely enraged by his failure. He cared not for the dead, nor did he care for Iwa's losses. He cared only that the gods created the Senju boy and said boy ruined everything. Orochimaru was broken from his musings as the door to his chambers creaked open. He could smell his faithful servant Kabuto and he was awaiting his report. The right hand of Orochimaru got down on one knee and reported to his master. Lord Orochimaru, Sasuke Uchiha's Phase 1 curse mark was implanted successfully. He will need a couple months for it to integrate into his chakra network before we could safely upgrade it to Stage 2. The boy seemed pleased with the increase in his power. Moving on, we have still not heard from the Sound 4. We presume they are captured or dead. Kimimaro did not need to activate his curse mark during the invasion, so he is stable at this time. He was able to kill a number of Konoha Jonin and Chunin before returning with Sasuke. You should know that the Uchiha clan suffered great losses during the invasion, but I have not yet informed Sasuke. His father perished to Iwa's demolition corps. Orochimaru hissed in a mix of pleasure and disgust. And what of Iwa's forces? Kabuto pushed up his glasses and hesitated a bit. Iwa's forces were decimated. Of the original Oto and Iwa forces, there were just over 500 survivors. Iwa still has Roshi and Kitsuki to run things, but they were weakened significantly. Additionally, Konoha has Kuretsuki, Kitsuki's daughter, held as a political prisoner. Konoha must be greatly weakened if the battle dragged out for so long. What of Konoha's forces? Orochimaru asked, hissing with anticipation for the damage report. Kabuto shifted uncomfortably. Actually, Lord Orochimaru, after the Kyuubi Jinchuriki calmed down, he went to the front lines. He did one of Lord First's combination jutsus and decimated the attacking forces. It is unknown how many casualties Konoha took, but best estimates suggest around 12 to 15%. There was also minimal damage to the city and civilian populations. They were ready for us to invade. Orochimaru hissed in disgust at the news and lashed out with some of his snake summons that wrapped around Kabuto's body and hissed angrily at him. You are telling me I lost 5 boss-level summons for less than 15% of Konoha's forces? Manda will eat me for such transgressions. My deepest apologies, Lord Orochimaru. Kabuto attempted to bow while he was wrapped up by the snakes. Put the Senju boy in the bingo books and find a way for me to get to him. He would be the perfect host, but the Kyuubi would prevent such a thing. If I can get some genetic material, I could create the ultimate vessel in time. Orochimaru appeared to lose himself in his fantasies. Well then, you will be pleased to know that he has 2 girlfriends. One of them was the reason that Naruto went berserk in the first place. However, Ino Yamanaka still remains. Kabuto said, hoping to inspire his master's conniving mind. Interesting. In some cave at a yet unknown location. 10 figures were having a meeting. 2 of these figures looked real while the rest appeared to be some sort of astral projections. They were each standing on a finger of a statue that was chained up and had 9 eyes that were closed. Each member wore a dark black cloak with red clouds that denoted them as members of the Akatsuki. They were just briefed by a plant-like creature on the events of the failed Konoha invasion. So, the leader with strange, purple-ringed eyes began, the Kyuubi Jinchuriki is much stronger than we planned for, and the 5 Tails was killed during the invasion. Yes, Lord Pain. The creature answered. This will disrupt our plans. According to what we know, the 5 Tails will not reform for another 3 to 5 years. When it does reform, it will do so in Konoha, which has become harder to spy on thanks to the Senju seals. Does that summarize the current state of affairs? The leader asked. Then we will need to adjust our plans. Perhaps we can take advantage of Iwa's weakened state. A hunched man wearing the robes suggested. Sasori my man, That might be an artistic idea, A blonde man with a strange monocle said enthusiastically. Perhaps it would be wise to recruit Iwa's forces to our cause. With Am and Iwa, we could begin recruiting the other minor nations. A familiar figure with blank white eyes suggested. The leader seemed to ponder the suggestion. He had worked with Hisashi for the past 6 months and found that the rogue Hyuga was knowledgeable when it came to politics. Iwa has refused our services in the past. The old Tsuchikage blamed us for Deidara's defection. How would you recruit him to our cause? That is easy. We have a shared enemy. They hated Naruto's father and now they will hate and fear him just as much. The boy may be strong, but we are all S-ranked shinobi. Iwa will not be able to refuse such an increase in their strength. Hisashi explained. A shark-like man with blue skin chimed in, I mean, what else do we have to do? The 3 tails is missing somewhere in Kiri and the 5 tails is likewise dead in Konoha. We cannot gather the Biju and hold them indefinitely while we wait for them to reform. You both make good points. We will work to bring Iwa under our thumb while the beasts are reforming. I will call for another meeting when we have a plan made. For now, continue taking jobs and earning money for our cause. Pain said. Yes, Leader Sama. The apparitions chorused before fading out of existence. The 2 remaining members were joined by a man in a swirling orange mask wearing the Akatsuki cloak. This is inconvenient for our plans to be delayed in such a manner because of a single boy. Pain looked dispassionately at the newcomer. Madara, we cannot change what has already happened. Will you be able to get the new Tsuchikage under your control? Madara scoffed, my pawn in Kiri is now useless, he had been turtling up in Kirigakure and losing the war. My Koto Amatsukami will take a little while to recharge, but if we build some trust in Iwa then it will be easier for me to manipulate him. The blue-haired woman with a paper flower in her hair and a lip stud spoke up, can you not use your Kamui to infiltrate Konoha and eliminate the boy? The boy wields powers almost equivalent to Hashirama. I would not be able to get in and out quickly enough. To make matters worse, whatever seals he has put up in his compound and the Hokage Tower make it so that I cannot warp in there. I am also tagged each time I have entered Konoha by the barrier protecting it and Anbu respond within minutes. Infiltrating Konoha is no longer a viable option. Madara said in a frustrated tone. How did the boy know about your ability? It is impressive that he found a way to neutralize it, but how did he know about it in the first place? Pain asked. According to our spies, the seal placed on him by his father endowed some of his father's knowledge onto the boy. It is likely that Minato warned him about my ability because he was the only one that ever lived after seeing me use it. The man in the mask said with disdain. The girl chuckled and the serene noise echoed around the cave. The mighty Madara brought down by a 13-year-old boy. That is enough, Conan. Madara is our ally. He should focus on getting Earth Country under our control. I will assign another team to Konoha. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.